Thank you very much, Sir Jeremy, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd like to beg to move that this House has considered rail services on the East Durham coastline. Given today's date, Sir Jeremy, some might expect me to start with an April Fool's joke. But after hearing about the state of rail services in my constituency, I think we will all agree no exaggeration or joke could be more ridiculous than the reality my constituents face every day. The service is characterised by delays, no-notice cancellations, dangerously overcrowded trains, particularly during peak periods, which all too often leave passengers stranded on the platforms. In London, this may not be an issue, with the next service arriving in a matter of minutes. At Seaham and Hordern, one cancelled service means at least an hour wait. Rail links should promote connectivity, providing opportunities to access education and employment. However, Northern Rail's failing services mean my constituents cannot depend on these transport links to maintain employment.
On that point, will you give way?
I'll happily give way to my friend.
Yes, thank my honourable friend for giving way. And would he agree with me that these opportunities that he has described affect his constituents in Easington, but extend down to my constituents in Billingham, in Teesside, and prevent our constituents seeking employment and education opportunities in the major conurbations of the North East?
Absolutely. I'm grateful for that intervention, and it's a point that's absolutely well made that I completely agree with. It's not just affecting the Easington constituency, but Hartlepool and Billingham and the Tees Valley too. It not only undermines local opportunities, but damages our local economy, takes wages out of our community, with people forced to move closer to work or to areas with more dependable transport links. The community welcomed the reopening of Hordern Station in June of 2020 after a prolonged battle to secure much-needed transport investment, but it was meant to unlock economic opportunities in Middlesbrough, in Sunderland and Newcastle. Instead, its unreliability and lack of additional services have only worsened pre-existing problems further down the line at Seaham. As a frequent passenger myself, I experienced the chaos caused by cancellations and insufficient capacity. And like my constituents, we simply cannot depend on Northern Rail and expect cancellations, delays and dangerous overcrowding, particularly when there are only 2 carriages at peak times. I do welcome the government's recent decision to publish train cancellation and delay data, including monthly figures on the worst performing stations, and that's via the ORR, the Office of Road and Rail. Holding operators to account is essential if we want things to improve. However, what the data doesn't capture are the passengers left on the platform due to overcrowding. Whether through cancellation or left stranded on the platform due to dangerous overcrowding, the outcome is the same. Passengers scrambling to find last-minute alternative means to travel. In the last 12 months, on average, 6% of trains were cancelled at Seaham and Hordern, at least 1 train every day, and only 2/3 run to time within 3 minutes. With 1 train per hour, these cancellations and delays have huge impacts. Northern Rail's performance is also erratic. In September of last year, there were 38 cancellations on this route. By October, that number had skyrocketed to 186, almost 5 times as many. By the end of 2024, the situation had deteriorated still further, leaving residents with no reliable means of reaching work, school, or vital appointments, such as health appointments by train. Northern attribute this in part to staff sickness, with driver absences at 17.6% and conductor absences at 16.9%. But my view, Sir Jeremy, is that questions need to be asked about what is driving such high levels of sickness at Northern Rail. Northern's proposed solution, and I've met the Chief Exec and senior officers on a number of occasions, that their proposed solution relying on rest day working is simply not sustainable. And I fear it's likely to increase staff sickness over the longer term. This is a safety critical industry, and we need to ensure staff are safely rested and not under pressure to work at unsustainable levels. The industry should not be running on voluntary overtime. It must employ enough staff to ensure resilience in the system. Another long-standing issue on this route is the lack of rolling stock. Now, until 2019, believe it or not, Sir Jeremy, we're still served by those old Pacer trains from the 1970s. We now have second-hand ScotRail class 158s and 156s, which have been refurbished, and in the North East we're more than willing to accept repurposed rolling stock, but only if the service is regular, reliable and meets our transport needs. A long-standing point of contention is Northern running only 2 carriages during peak periods instead of 4. The lack of carriages is not just inconvenient, it's a health and safety concern. I've previously in debates raised a case of a young boy who fell unconscious on an overcrowded train. I can't imagine the terror watching your child going limp, eyes rolling back and collapsing, with no escape in an overcrowded carriage. Overcrowding is still a concern. On match days, I happen to be a Sunderland supporter, Sir Jeremy, but sometimes as well when Newcastle are playing, scores of people are left on the platform at Horden and Seaham because the once-an-hour 2-carriage train is already full from people who are getting on the train at Stockton and Billingham and Hartlepool, and the train's absolutely crammed, so you just can't get on. My constituents are left feeling angry and frustrated. Since I became the MP in 2010, this issue has been raised repeatedly, but very little has changed. I therefore welcome my government, the new government's commitment to the creation of Great British Railways. We cannot promote economic growth with failing public transport until our broken railway system is finally back on track, as we end decades of waste and start restoring public trust. But there's a lot more to be done. Northern Rail actually returned to public ownership in 2020 after the previous franchise, which had taken millions of pounds in dividends in return for even substandard services then. While there may no longer be dividends rewarding failure, the service remains substandard. I would like to thank the Rail Minister for meeting with me and other colleagues recently to discuss the government's plan, which is fantastic, to procure 450 new trains for Northern Rail. It's a very welcome step. However, I wonder if the Minister in his response can confirm how many of these trains will be allocated to the East Durham coastline. Given the isolation my constituents feel due to unreliable transport, will the Minister prioritise East Durham for the delivery of newly procured trains? This long-term investment in new rolling stock is essential. It's fantastic, but its impact will not be felt until at least 2030. And I believe, and many others do, we need some interim solutions, which, if you don't mind, Sir Jeremy, I'd like to outline in the time that's remaining. So, firstly, Grand Central, the open access operator, has submitted 2 applications to the Office for Road and Rail. One seeks to extend their track access agreement beyond 2027, but the other proposes more services, including a new stop at Seaham. The Grand Central service currently runs through that station without stopping. This would not only provide additional capacity to Sunderland and Hartlepool, where services are severely overcrowded, but also create the first direct link from my constituency to York and London. The Grand Central service already passes through Seaham. Adding a stop would only extend the journey by a few minutes. The benefits of this additional stop for Seaham cannot be overstated. Grand Central is still waiting a decision, and I kindly ask the Minister if he can provide an update on this by the ORR. I understand the government may be reluctant to expand open access operators, their contracts, given the move towards public ownership and concerns about loss of revenue. However, to my constituents, Northern and Grand Central are not running in competition. They are simply providers of rail services which are desperately needed in my constituency. Second suggestion, we must increase northern services from East Durham to Middlesbrough and Newcastle. I was very pleased to receive a positive response to a written parliamentary question confirming that the Rail North Partnership, on behalf of the Department for Transport and Transport for the North, is examining a business case for increasing services at Horden and Seaham by December 2025. The ministerial response also said that the analysis must balance the economic and social benefits of this enhancement with the performance of existing services and the financial impact on taxpayer subsidy. But I would gently remind the Minister that the economic and social benefits of this enhancement to my constituents must not be underestimated. For those without access to cars, and we have very low car ownership in East Durham, it's incredibly difficult to get to Newcastle, Sunderland or Middlesbrough without spending hours on buses. People turn down jobs in college places because they simply have no way getting there reliably. This is a major barrier to economic growth. A small but significant improvement would be to amend the timetable of the semi-fast northern service between Middlesbrough and Newcastle. Since 2023, this 2-hourly service has skipped Seaham and Horden despite high demand. Often that service is a 4-carriage train as well, I might say. The time saved by bypassing these two stops, these two stations in my constituency, is between 4 to 6 minutes. Adding these stops would provide immediate relief to my constituents with an additional train every 2 hours. All three of these solutions, Sir Jeremy, Grand Central's additional stop, increasing northern services and minor timetable adjustments are needed while we await the arrival of new rolling stock beyond 2030. If we are serious about local growth in East Durham, people must be able to travel out of their towns and villages to work, study and access local amenities. Pubs, restaurants, cafes, medical facilities, shops. I wrote to the Secretary of State in January and February outlining these issues, and I would really welcome the opportunity to meet with ministers to discuss these further. The people of East Durham have waited far too long for reliable rail service. They have endured overcrowding, cancellations, an outdated network that fails to meet their needs. And while I warmly welcome the government's commitment to procuring new trains and increasing services, some short-term action is also required. Reliable transport is not a luxury. It's a necessity for jobs, education and economic growth. And I would urge the Minister to prioritise East Durham and work with me and other colleagues to ensure that Seaham and Horden finally get the rail service they deserve. Thank you.